All right, everyone. Welcome back. Man, am I excited for this one. At the end of our last conversation, I remember thinking like, damn, I wish we had about an hour and a half more together. And I also wish that it was in person. Now, we probably have that hour and a half, but we are still not in person. But maybe one day, Steve, we can do this in person. But welcome back to the DreamState Livin podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Hey, third time's a charm, man. If you ever want to fly me out to Colombia, just say the word. I'll be right on that flight, brother.
Okay, better puppy. As long as it's okay with your wife.
Oh, yeah, of course. I know. Very, very handsome gringos must get in trouble down there all the time, huh?
For sure. A lot of folk from Inglaterra too. They like your accent as the rest
Oh,
of the
that's
world.
funny.
Well,
No, but thank you for having me back on, dude. The first conversation was fun, and yeah, that's what I do. I'm a professional yapper, so I'm excited to yap with you today, and let's see where it goes.
I'm excited to yap as well. I wanted to start off with something I've been thinking about, and I even was pondering on it more today. And in life, we train, whether it's in the gym or we train our mental. And what I've kind of been thinking about the why behind why we train. And one thing that comes up for me is responsibility. And when you break down the word responsibility, it can break down to response able. And when I'm thinking, it's like, okay, why do I go to the gym? Why do we do CrossFit? Why do we do these things? Why do I read books? Why do I do a podcast? And so we can have a better responsibility, response-ableness to life, uncertainties of life. For example, you have children. If you're somewhere and there's a threat, well, you're a physically capable guy. So you're in a better position. You have a better responsibility to protect your family. And when the stresses of life occur because of work that we'll do on ourselves, we have a better response ableness to handle the stresses of life. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that. If you've kind of maybe thought about it similar to your training that you do physically and then also mentally, to kind of the point that I'm going at there.
Correct. Yes. I think the reason we do anything, hopefully, is to get good at life. That's my lens. I don't do CrossFit or yoga or animal flow to get good at the skills themselves. That's just a natural byproduct of wanting to get better at life. And what does that mean? It's something like you just articulated, your responsibility. Not only physically, to be able to actually be capable. And God forbid you ever needed to get your family out of a tough situation, that you could actually do that. Recently I went on a trip to Costa Rica. And our Airbnb host was like, yeah, we have a private river. It's a very easy hike down and you could take the kiddos. She undersold that. It was not that easy. And we're pretty physically competent, but we were underprepared for it. And one part of the hike down literally required rappelling on a rope. And we got to that point and I was able to throw one kid over my shoulder. My wife was able to put the baby on her back and we both were able to get down this thing, but it was pretty gnarly. And I was laughing because without that responsibility to that predicament, we would have been like, oh, well, I guess we're not going to the river today. We literally couldn't get there, So your physical health, fitness, etc., coordination, it actually will take you to places that you otherwise could not go without it. So another example from that trip, we went to a waterfall. Everybody was at the bottom of the waterfall. It was wonderful. I said, I'm going to climb that waterfall. Nobody else could climb the waterfall. So I climbed the waterfall and I went to like 3 other waterfalls and I had them all to myself. Why? Because I could. So, that's a natural byproduct of doing things in the gym and building skills and balance and coordination. But I don't really do it to just get better at the gym. That's just kind of, it's the vehicle for transformation. It's like, why do you meditate? To calm the mind. Well, why? Well, it's valuable because you need that calm mind when life gets stressful, for example. So yes, I fully agree with you. I think the reason I do anything, especially since growing up a little bit and actually thinking about things with any kind of intentionality, because when I was, in my early 20s, I didn't really know why I was doing anything. I was just kind of blowing in the breeze. And does it look cool? Sure, I'll do that. Now, being a little bit older, a little bit more self-aware, mature, and also being a father, you kind of have to be a bit more aware and intentional with where you're placing your energies and asking the question, what for? Like, what purpose does it serve? So yes, I'm definitely in that phase of life now where I love my physical pursuits and my pursuit for fitness. But really, if it was a detriment to my life, and why would it ever be that? It would be a thing that I'd have to drop. Now it just serves my life. It allows me more vitality, and hopefully sets me up to be a better leader for my kids in the future. And I want to be the kind of dad that's keeping them on their toes. You know, when they're 16, 17, 18, and they're trying to beat me, I want to be that 60-year-old that's like, all right, come on, let's see what you got. And I want to stave them off for as long as possible and set them up to also be little gangsters in the future. So yeah, it's a deep answer to why we do anything, but I think, yeah, if you look at it through that lens, it's very useful.
Yeah. Growing up, my father was a black belt in Taekwondo,
Mhm.
and at a young age, he taught us Taekwondo in the house. And I remember seeing my dad go for runs. He'd get home from work. He was a carpet cleaner, so he had a physical job. He'd come home from work and he'd hit the bag and he'd go for a run. And I believe that was a big part of my growth in my life and
Yeah.
what kind of led to me having this serious focus on fitness throughout my whole life. How has your approach to fitness and maybe your mental training changed since you brought children into this world?
hmm Well, let me answer that with a question first. Ethan, if your dad came home every day and told you that it was very important to be physically competent and fit and able, but he was a slob, would you have took his example seriously?
No, of course not. And I would have maybe seen as that being the standard to be fit is to be a slob.
Right, exactly. So the one thing that really changes what you realize when you have children is that they'll listen to a little bit of what you say, but they're really going to mirror what you do. They're really going to follow your example. So I think it's very, very important for parents and people that want to become parents to start training this skill now, which is to be a man or a woman of your word, like really be in integrity, which means
Mm,
that your internal and external match. Like you say what you mean what you say, and you back it up with evidence. Because I don't want to be the kind of parent that gives cliche advice but doesn't actually live it. I hate the idea of being a talking head. So it's really been something that I didn't value before that, being in the public sphere, for want of a better word, trying to be online. I was always like, I'm not going to talk about this stuff if I haven't lived it and experienced it and breathe it, because I feel like that's out of integrity. It's being a fraud. But then when you're raising little humans and you realize everything matters, more so what you do than what you say, because words don't quite land on a 2-year old, but they're watching everything. And I think your example teaches way more than your words do. And then as they get older, you can layer the words in and the mind games and the philosophical debates and really question those thoughts. But those delicate first, probably, 10 years or so, they're just like watching and they're soaking everything up through your actions like a sponge. So
mm.
yeah, I really do think that it's extra important to be an example in that way, because your children are inheriting the small corner of the earth through you, and you've got to set a good example so that when they grow up and they're an adult, they're like, well, I don't really know why I do these things, but I saw my dad do it and I really respected him and it clearly served him. And that's very natural. Then you don't need to have to grind that hard and pull teeth to get in the gym and work out, because you've just done it for so long and you've seen that it created good results for your father who you respect. So you naturally follow the path, right? And I hope that's the path my children will follow too. But funny, like an hour ago or so, I posted a reel, and I think about this as a philosophy for parenting too, which is the reel stated, I don't own my children. They are not mine. They carry my name. They live in my home. I've got my lineage. They came through me and my wife, but they are not mine to own, in the sense that I'm a guardian and a shepherd, not a gatekeeper. Because they're not mine, I don't get to put my limits or expectations on them. My role here is to guide, nurture, protect them, keep them safe, and hopefully carve a path for them to fulfill the desire to become radically and authentically who they came here to become. And I think so many parents try to mold their children to be what they want them to be, because
Mm.
kids become the next status symbol. Once you're getting older and you've done career things and you play status games in that way, the next logical game is to use your kids as a status symbol. You see it all the time. People show off the kids. They show off when they do good at school. They show off when they're the star of the football team or something like that. But that also teaches kids conditional love. It's basically saying, oh, I love you. I love you so much. But I really love you when you get straight A's and I can post you on my social media. And Carl Jung said that the greatest task a child must bear is the unfinished business of the parent. So that's something that rings really true for me. I don't want to put my unfinished stuff and my unfinished business on my children. I've kind of got to humble myself get out of the way, ask what's required of me to be the kind of leader that I hope they are happy to have one day, but just fully support them in pursuing what they are passionate about and what they want to become, and help them to figure out that, because that's a big question, right? Especially for a youngster. What do you want to become? We were all asked that at some point as a kid. And we'd usually
Mm,
be like, oh, I'm a basketball player or something. No, what do you really want and why? And to nurture that instead of being like, you should be a doctor, you should be a lawyer, you should be somebody serious, because then the world will take you serious. Because we've seen, I don't think that that's working very well. There's a bunch of very serious people that aren't terribly happy, you know? So parenting will just break your brain in so many ways. It'll make you question everything you do. And if you're doing it right, it will be for the better.
mm. Do you think a lot of parents are trying to have that forced control because they are mine, this is my child, and it's up to me to bring them down the right path? And it's maybe, I don't know, coming from a lack of trust within the child and their growth, or can you elaborate on that a little bit, Steve?
There's a saying in parenting where people say you're only as happy as your least happy child. And it's an interesting one because there's some truth to it. I think about this dichotomy of being in the world but not of it. It's actually a line from the Bible. Jesus Christ said that. Be in the world but not of it. What does that mean? It's the recognition that this whole game of life is something like the grand illusion. That the illusion is that we're separate, that we're not eternal, and that we're temporarily trapped in this meat suit. But it's the realist illusion. Feels very real. And then you add things to it that you really, really love, and you get tied up in those and you start identifying with those, and it becomes so very real. One of those is parenting, because it creates a brand new identity. Now you're not just Steve, you're a parent. And everything that we get our sense of self worth from is usually some kind of identification. And if
Mm,
you think about it, most people get their identifications through things like their career. And, you know, what's the most common question people ask when they meet you is, what do you do? And the reason they're asking you, what do you do, is because they're trying to play this game of like, how much of a somebody is this person? And they're trying to rank themselves to your somebodyness. So if you meet a doctor, ooh, that's quite a somebody. But if you meet a nomadic backpacker, it's interesting because they're less of a somebody, but in more ways, everybody admires the nomadic backpacker because they broke free of the somebody training. They're not playing the status games. But man, you want to talk about the craziest identification? It's a parent. And that's where that belief comes from, that I can only be as happy as my least happy child because I've become too wrapped up in the identity of being a parent, which
mm,
means I don't just want them to do well. I take on all of their suffering. I, as a parent, if I identify in that way, if they are mine to own, then them not doing so good, I feel as a moral failure. I feel that like that I disappointed myself and people are going to judge me for that. So I think it's like a fear of judgment as well. So I think there's a lot going on when it comes to parenting, but I think this healthy detachment from understanding that just because you're a parent doesn't mean that, you know, your child's success in life determines your worth as a person, but it's a very tricky thing to try and navigate, you know?
yeah. I think about my childhood a lot, and my mom and dad were very understanding of my path, and I always took a very untraditional route. Didn't really do good in school, but I kind of like had the gift of the gab, so I kind of sold my way throughout high school and was just communicating very well. And then after that, I was like, "No, mom, I don't want to go to college. I'm gonna wait tables at a fancy restaurant in Providence." She's like, "Okay, cool. Go do your thing. I support you." My dad, same thing. Go do your thing. I support you. It was never like, "Oh, Ethan, no, you should go do this." There was trust in my decision throughout the whole process, and to me, that was I thank my parents all the time for that.
It's huge.
And on the contrary, I see many people I grew up with, their parents were riding them like crazy. You need to do this. You can't smoke weed or anything, or we're gonna kill you. And whatever it was, I mean, I was growing a pot plant in my mom's basement in high school, and she knew, but pretended she didn't know, and didn't really, she cared, but she didn't put so much pressure on me. I was a teenager, and she kind of let me be free, and I think I turned out all right. But unfortunately, I see some of these other people where their parents were trying to make them the perfect person, and they're having a lot of trouble right now. Anxiety through the absolute roof. They have social problems. They're sitting with a therapist. They have a, ch- a challenging life. It's a push life. and I don't see them truly enjoying it. I don't say that to knock on them, and I feel bad for them, but it's kind of the reality of what seems to be starting from that root cause of so much pressure and maybe control from their parents.
Hmm.
Um, did your like with your upbringing and your parents, how did that go?
It was similar to your experience, I think, in the sense that, whilst my parents sometimes may have been confused about my choices and my life path, they still supported them. And it never felt like I was being judged for them. And that's very, very important. I think it is a natural inclination and tendency for, especially when you're younger, this natural rebellious spirit to want to push back against what you are told you can and cannot do. I never did good in school. We're probably very similar in that way, like hence the travel and the gift of the gab and wanting to yap and things like that. We'd probably have very similar, like big five personality traits and all of that stuff. But it would have been a very different manifestation of how that played out if you had the quote unquote controlling, oppressive parents that put their unfinished business on you, because they wouldn't really have supported that. And then there's a resentment, right? Because we want to rebel. And the worst thing you can do for a kid is tell them they can't do it, because it's just going to make them want to do it more. It's the forbidden fruit analogy, right? You've got this you can't drink, and as soon as they get a chance to run away from the home, they're going to go get blind drunk with the friends, because they're kind of supposed to test those boundaries. So I think the more loving, even though it feels less controlling, it's actually giving so much more agency and trust and love back to your kid, is to just educate and say, here are the consequences of drinking. My parents let me have a beer with them when I was getting probably curious about that stuff, just growing up naturally, because you're 14, 15, 16 or whatever. And they're like, yeah, do you want a beer? I would rather you have a beer with us and you can feel what that experience is like, as opposed to us being like, nope, you're underage, you can't have a beer. Because then I'm going to run off as soon as I get the chance and take 10 beers to the face, because I don't know what I'm doing and I'm young and I'm dumb and I'm naive. And look, I work with a ton of adults, and so many of those adults are still working through what expectations and shame and judgment was put on them in their early life. And a lot of the time that comes from the parents, and a lot of the time it comes from religious trauma and cultural baggage and all these different ways that we kind of get enculturated. But you'd be amazed at how much stuff comes from our parents, our attachment styles. That's very common to talk about now, like the how do we are we anxious attached, are we avoidant? A lot of that starts in very, very early childhood in the relationship to the primary caregivers. And then all the stuff that comes with that, the expectations, the pressure. Do good at school. This is what the men in our family do. This is what the women in our family do. What religion you're supposed to take or not, etc. And it's all just piled on. And you've got this developing thing that is trying to find its own sense of self in the world. And you're saying, like, no, you don't get to do that, actually. You do what we say, because you are mine and I own you. And this is what we do. And you can see that that's a very different approach to maybe the approach that your parents are taking, and the approach that I'm trying to take with my children too, which is like, more about education and the conversation around it. And you are a free sovereign being, and you are free to then pursue what you want to. And you're also free to make your own mistakes. And if you make mistakes, we'll be here to love you and help you pick up the pieces, but you're free to do it.
Mm. Do you have trouble with that? Having this kind of thought of you are not mine with your children?
No, I've always had that belief that, because whether this is my way of making it make sense because it's how I see the world. Look, I think about this a lot. Perception is reality. We all experience the world as we perceive it to be. So we, in some ways, live inside the models, the projective models of our attachments and desires and philosophies and world beliefs. And for that reason, that means if you and I were in the same room right now and we had the exact same experience and we were sharing this conversation and something happened, our stories and recounts and perception of that story, despite it being the same room, the same time, the same experience, could be radically different. And that is based on how you view the world, how I view the world, our upbringing, because I came from England, you came from this place and that place. So in a sense, what then we get stuck in is what is known as confirmation bias. We literally have a part of the brain called the default mode network that goes scanning and looking for evidence to prove ourselves right. And we're very self-righteous creatures. We love being right about things, even if being right hurts us, which you see that all the time. People that believe the world is an awful, miserable place. And they just go scanning the environment to confirm that belief. And then they're like, see, the world is an awful, miserable place. And I'm like, oh, congratulations, pat on the back. You are having a miserable existence. So what I'm trying to say is, like, I feel this way about this philosophy of not owning my child, and probably, my brain is doing the filtering game to support that based on my personal experiences with kind of how I view life itself and what I am, not as a person, not as these identifications and thoughts and beliefs, but what I am. Like, who am I? What am I? Am I a soul? Am I a spirit, etc.? And I kind of take this more philosophical, spiritual, religious belief, whatever you want to call it, that I chose this. I chose this incarnation at this particular time. I chose my parents. I chose this curriculum, this karmic curriculum called life that is inbuilt to the particular lessons that my soul still needed to learn. And if I believe that about my life, how could I believe anything different about my son's life? So I do believe that he chose my wife and I, but I don't believe in personal like ownership over anything. You literally do not own anything. It's a fallacy to believe you own anything. It's like, oh, I live on 12 acres. I own this land. Nobody
Yeah.
owns land. It's just points on a map. It's silly. It's functional and it's useful, but it kind of is a house of cards that crumbles, like based on first principles. There is no ownership over anything. So in the sense of like, I love my son so much, transform my life so much. Like I love my family so much. And at the same time, how can you be in the world but not of it? This is explained quite beautifully by this story of a Tibetan monk. And monks, as you know, they just meditate all day long. And because they have more of like an Eastern philosophy about the world, they kind of see this concurrent wheel of samsara, that death is not the end. It's just a transformation. It's a new beginning. And Maya is the illusion. The illusion is separation. The illusion is identification with the mind. So they see the game of life as like, it's the illusion. And one day the Grand Master, the students come in to find him sobbing on the floor. And they're very confused as to why a Grand Master would be sobbing. And they ask him what happened. And he said, my son passed away. And they have a condolence, but then they said, but sir, you understand that, it's all an illusion at the end of the day, right? And he says, of course, but this is the greatest illusion. It's the most painful one. And that
Mm.
explains to me wonderfully what this thing is. It's like holding on to this, like almost this loose grip of life itself, because everything is in transformation all the time. And also that, like, it's not about escaping your humanness. It's not about not getting caught up with that stuff. Like, it does scare me when I think about things like dying, for example, not because I'm scared of death itself, but I'm scared, the human in me, the ego, the attachments in me is scared of leaving behind the things that I love more than anything in this life. So it's a constant tug of war, and that's why I need practices to always keep remembering. And it's meditation, it's prayer, it's all these other things that allow me to practice deep love, be in the world but not of it, and this like tension between loving and holding on and continuing to let go at every moment also. And it's a dance, man. And in some days it's better and some days it's worse and everything in between.
Truly is a dance. I was in December, I was in Thailand, and this is my third time spending time at this particular monastery. It's in Pai, northern Thailand. They practice Vipassana style
Mm.
meditation, and you're allowed to ask the monks questions, which I really love about this monastery. And we were talking about this idea of ownership, which interestingly enough, we're talking about right now. And the monk kind of broke it down as ownership leads to the dukkha, and the dukkha is suffering.
Yep.
Um, Once we claim and see these things as ours, that leads to suffering, and then the suffering makes us crave more of these things. So it's just interesting. Maybe you reminded me of that point. Another thing I was thinking about when you were talking about your children and not having this ownership, and you know I think that might lead to you seeking wisdom from them because they are not mine. We're learning together. And it reminds me of this quote I heard a long time ago. I think it was from Stephen R. Covey. And he talks about it takes a high level of maturity to take advice when you know you're right. When
Hmm.
we know we're right, when we have so much evidence in our mind, we know we're right. It takes a high level of maturity to take advice from someone, whether it would be your 2-year old. When you think you know you're right, but then sometimes this world has an interesting way of showing you that you know nothing,
Yes.
and we know nothing. I guess I'm curious your thoughts on that when you're a very intelligent person. And I think that leads to you probably knowing that there's so much more you don't know than what you do know. And the
Mm.
big picture, we really don't know. much at all. I'm just curious your thoughts on that, Steve.
Yeah, there's a cool quote. See if I can pull it out of the recesses of the brain without butchering it, but it's something like, as the island of knowledge grows, so does the wisdom of ignorance. Like, the more you know, the less you realize you actually do know. And it's,
Yeah.
it's this natural arc. The Dunning-Kruger effect is basically, the less you know, the more stubbornly you know it. It's this belief that we all go through. It's kind of like being young too, when you've just latched onto one idea, or you found a dietary ideology that really worked for you. For example, you're like, oh, this is the one for everyone. And it's almost like the blessing and the burden of, so little that you just can like giga chad ram that as the solution to every single thing. And then you start to learn more. And then the doubt creeps in and you go through the valley of despair and you're like, I know nothing. So, kids are a really wonderful reminder of that again, too. And exactly what you said, the frame that I always try and stay in with my children is, I understand it's reciprocal. There's a relationship here, like it's give and take. And as much as I hope to teach them, I have already learned more from them than they have from me. I can guarantee you that, because I've used them, not in a manipulative way, and in what I think is a very healthy way, to polish the mirror. I believe that the world is a mirror. The world itself is neutral. The events that happen inside of our own projective world are only meaningful to the degree that we give them meaning. So, if I believe something is bad, it's because there's some kind of moral judgments against that. And that's a deep discussion in and of itself. But like, the things in the world are just mirroring back to me my internal state. So when I am quote unquote right and I'm arguing with a tyrannical 2-year-old toddler, the goal is to not get wrapped up in the idea that, well, he's just a 2-year-old and he's dumb and he doesn't know. And obviously I'm right. It's actually to forget that whole game altogether and look at the mirror. This little baby right now that's having a tantrum, my son, Indy, is a 2-year-old mirror that is reflecting me back to me through me. And it's like, why? Oh, yeah, in that sense, like, what is happening here, for example, if I get into a power struggle with a toddler, which people do all the time, and it's hilarious to watch, is firstly, you're never going to win because it's not rational. But the toddler is not being rational. They're not supposed to be rational right now. You're trying to solve an emotional problem that they're having through the rational mind. Instead of asking, like, why do you want to solve this problem? Why do you need to stop the tantrum? Because usually it's got nothing to do with the kid and everything to do with how the kid's tantrum is making you feel. You basically don't feel comfortable that they are being unreasonable and screaming. But that has nothing to do with them and everything for your capacity to hold their big feelings right now. Usually, as well, this is amplified if you're in a public setting. Ooh, that's the test for parents. Can you let your kid have a meltdown in the grocery store and be okay with that? Can you be so okay in yourself that you don't combine with the environment and be like, oh, they're going to think I'm an awful parent. I've got to drag this kid out. Maybe I've got to hit them. I've got to spank them. All these thoughts come up because you're like, oh, what are they thinking? And the truth is all the time that nobody's really thinking anything. Everybody's too wrapped up in their own world and their own bullshit to really care about you. And most of the time, especially once you've become a parent, if you see a kid having a hard time out in public, you just feel compassion for the parent more than anything else, because you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, they are crazy sometimes. Yeah, they are. But I think we all have this like baggage that, again, it's this presenting that, oh, well, I'm a good parent. My kid doesn't do this at home. I don't know why they're doing it. I'm going to drag you out by the ear. It's all this baggage comes up really quickly. And in that moment, you can either be reactive and lash out, or, say mean words, or let this tantrum, literally alter your peace, or you can kind of respond to it and check in with yourself and regulate yourself. And it's so funny, if you can regulate yourself in those moments, you usually will regulate the toddler without having to punish necessarily. Now,
Mm.
people would take something like that and get really, it can go too far. You can take anything too far, because you also have to have healthy boundaries with a child. There's this term called gentle parenting, and it's gone absolutely bonkers. And I think this is where people would take, it's that philosophy of thought just gone to its extremes where it's no longer healthy. So they don't ever correct their children. There is no ounce of discipline, because they want to take more of this virtuous moral standing. But then that's not actually fair to the child. Because what the child actually needs is to understand hierarchy and boundaries, and it's constantly testing its boundaries. Imagine like a bowling lane, and this kid doesn't know how to bowl, and you're not going to put the boundaries up because you're like, well, they have to learn to bowl one day anyway. But now they're having a really shitty game because everything is going in the gutter. Like, you can put boundaries up and allow them to have fun, knowing that as they get better, you can pull those down as they get better at playing the game of life. But it's healthy to have
Yes.
boundaries. It's healthy to have a little bit of fear and respect from the child to parent archetype because they need to. And if you even look at nature, nature doesn't make mistakes and nature parents this way. Like Mother Nature and the feminine in particular can be really quote unquote cruel when it needs to be to correct bad behavior, to literally nip it in the bud. And you see animals nip their youth all the time. But then it's immediately back to love. The nip is not out of
Yes.
anger. The nip is out of correction and it's coming from a place of love. So there's two extreme ends of the spectrum where like hitting your kids and being a tyrannical monster and leader, not cool. Not having any boundaries and being like, oh, well, we're just going to love them unconditionally. Also, a little bit not cool. You have to have some kind of boundaries. And this is the delicate dance of being a parent and how you practice all of that because you can only parent to the degree that you've got any kind of self awareness and any kind of coping tools and any kind of regulated nervous system. And if you don't, parenting is the hardest job in the world anyway. But if you also are in a unaware body, the nervous system is all kinds of out of whack, and you're in a job that you hate, and you're over stressed, and you're underslept, and you're worried about money, and then your kids throwing a tantrum. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. It's very, very difficult, you know? And that's why I reserve judgment when I see parents doing whatever they're doing because it's very hard. It's very hard and you don't know what they're going through. So it's easy to say like good parent, bad parent, but it's hard, man. It's tough.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me, and for the listeners right now, one thing that I'm thinking, hearing you speak, is for me, I don't have children right now, but listening to you, for me, it starts now. Like I need to start preparing myself and do what I need to do to make sure that I'm ready. Cause I'm sure that these parents that might lash out and freak out in public is because they weren't really trained. They weren't really ready. They don't know how to regulate their own system,
Yes.
their own nervous system. So it's leading to them lashing out. And unfortunately, that's creating a lot of samsaras and scars in these children that are being raised, and it's going to continue for generation because
Correct.
one person was not able to work on themselves to have this regulation and control. I think about this a lot, Steve, and over the past maybe 8 years, I've had to kind of shed a lot of things out of my life that don't serve me. I got a ton of booze behind me, but that's not mine. I don't drink alcohol because if I drink alcohol, I can have a beer or two every once in a while. But if I drink alcohol, the next 5 days for me, I am my responsibility, back to what we were talking about in the beginning,
Hmm.
my response able meter is down here. I can have a client reach out to me and be very upset. And if I was thrown off by drinking a lot or other things that I know are not good for me, my responsibility is going to be shit. I'm going to
Hmm.
respond in not a way that I'm going to be happy with. But I had to learn that the hard way. I had to make a lot of mistakes to know it's like, okay, this is what's good for me. This is what's going to make me, good and even keel on a consistent basis. And these are the things that are going to pull me down and maybe get me into a challenging time in public,
Yes.
or lash out on my children in public, or hit my dog for crapping in the middle of the road in front of these people. Now I feel embarrassed when a dog's that's what they do.
Yes.
So
Yeah. It's all,
interesting.
it's, it all starts now. Absolutely. And it's the ability to fundamentally, more than anything else, just not be so reactionary, to understand because you've experienced and you've trained the gap between reaction and response. That there's a moment where most people have never experienced it really, that something happens, stimulus, and then there's this immediate reaction. And almost always when we react, it's more like emotional and it's not very well thought through. And so often we regret it, right? So often we say that mean word, and as soon as it escapes our mouth, we're like, oh, I wish I could get that back. So
Yeah.
often we kick our dog and we're like, why I kick the dog? The dog just being a dog. It's because I didn't acknowledge or even understand or become aware of there's a gap there if we train it between this thing that triggered me and my immediate reaction. There's a small gap and that moves you into responsibility again. We're back at that word.
Mm,
Reaction versus response is very, very different energy. But if you've never trained it, how are you going to know that? So
yeah.
how do you train it? Well, number one, life is your teacher. Your guru is everywhere. The next lesson that you need is right where you are, right in front of you, always. But you've got to, kind of really be aware about opportunities to practice this. And sometimes it literally needs to be a practice. It needs to be something like meditation, where you
Mm,
watch how automatic your mind goes and you consciously just come back to the breath or the mantra or whatever it is.
mm,
Digital detoxing, getting off your phones, taking retreats, like immersive experiences, like feeling is believing. Because the one thing that I love, obviously, is podcasting. And the one thing I kind of hate about podcasting and the information economy at the same time is that it leads to an awful lot of mental masturbation. It leads to an awful lot of good ideas with a lack of implementing on them. So, even one of our oldest cliches is knowledge is power. And I don't believe that's true. I think that knowledge is potential. I think that knowledge only becomes powerful if you do something with it. Otherwise, you're just, a guy carrying around a big head full of ideas, and that's wonderful. But if your life doesn't show it, you don't really know it. Like, literally, the highest form of knowing is showing. And
mm,
so many people are living in the head with these wonderful ideas and quotes and stuff, but their life doesn't show it.
yeah.
And if you're living in your head, you might as well be dead. So it's about getting below the neck. It's about that integration. And that's what's really missing in our culture with everything. It's just this constant consumption with a lack of integration, even in healthy, quote unquote, endeavors like spiritual endeavors, plant medicine retreats. Oh my God, I got all these awesome downloads. Don't integrate. And now you're back 3 months later chasing the dragon again, getting whacked over the head with the same lessons. And the ayahuasca or the mushrooms are saying, like, the fuck are you doing back here? You didn't do anything with what I gave you last time. Like, get out of
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's this don't just consume, you'll become intellectually obese. And there'll be wonderful ideas, but it's like the nutrition thing, you can eat all the healthiest food, but still, if you ate 10 times more than you needed, you would get fat still on healthy food. It's hard to do, but you can. So this is always my call to action for people that are probably like you and I, like information consumption junkies, always reading, always in self-development. It's wonderful. It served me so good. But there's certainly times where I've gone overboard. There's certainly
Totally.
times when I've been at the buffet of options, just like more, more, more. The next quote will change my life, the next idea, the next podcast. And every now and then I stop and I'm like, ew, like I'm good.
Yeah.
Recently, a few weeks ago, I had a ceremony actually. And since then, I've barely consumed anything because I've almost got a repulsion to it
It's
because
awesome.
I'm so hungover and full from my last unconscious 12 months of just like obnoxious levels of consumption, even though it was good. It was productive stuff.
Yeah.
I was listening to the next this and that and the other and enrolling in courses. And then you realize, like, stop. All the answers are within, and you need to like detox from all of that and just work on the doing and the being of life. And I think, to your point right now, whether you're going to be a parent, whether you're a parent already, or you're going to be a parent, or maybe you'll never be a parent, it still serves to always do this work because it improves the quality of your life. Nobody ever regretted becoming less reactive. Nobody. Nobody ever regretted becoming more responsive, aware, grounded, able to self regulate, because that doesn't just improve your ability to be a parent, it's directly impactful to your romantic relationships, your interpersonal relationships, what you choose to do for work, your experience with strangers, how much clarity and awareness you can bring to relatively mundane moments, which really makes them special. And then how much clarity and awareness comes to special moments, which makes them just unbelievable to the level you could never imagine. So I think, yeah, the work is always right here. And, you owe it to your children if that's a path you want to pursue in the future. We all owe it to our children to do what we can do, because I think the best gift we can give to our children is to work on ourselves and to
Mm,
give them the best version of ourselves. And a lot of the time, that's a lot of the inner work. I think for the longest time, the male myth, at least, has been that the best gift you can give to your children is security and nice things and, consumerism. And the number one regret of men on their deathbeds, over and over again, overwhelmingly so, is that they didn't spend enough time with their kids. And why didn't they spend enough time with the kids? Because they were out there being the provider for them. And it's a rough one, because this is kind of the role we're put in. So how do you like square that circle? I do want to provide. I don't want to get to the end of my life and say, fuck, I missed all of the youth because I was too busy out there grinding. To what point is that healthy anymore, though? At a certain point, you've got to know when enough is enough. Like, oh, I'm satiated. My kids actually need my presence more than they need me adding another $50,000 to my portfolio or my salary at this point, And that is only going to come through these kinds of questions that we ask ourselves and this level of self-awareness.
yeah. I talk about this. I say it in a different word, but podcast porn, and I talk about this in my mastermind. And even the things that I'll talk about in my mastermind, I keep it very simple, but I've had many people come and go, and then some people will stay in it for a year and a half, and they're always excited to learn the information, but there's no implementation, and
Mhm.
there's always new things that they're learning, which is great. I love to learn new things. It's kind of funny as you were talking, I was reminded of a really close friend of mine, Andrew. And Andrew and I used to set we'd have accountability with each other. It's like, hey, we need to take breaks on YouTube because we're listening to too many
Mm.
videos about like Jungoian philosophy and these type of things, and we're going down these rabbit
Yeah.
holes. And I'm calling
Yeah.
him up. I'm like, dude, you got to check out this video. I can't believe I got to tell you what I just learned. And so we'll have like, okay, we got to earn like 30 minutes and 45 minutes of a podcast, and that is sitting in the gap and
Yes.
earning that time because I find that my brain, I get, and it's interesting to acknowledge this, and I'm sure the listeners and you, Steve, can relate to this. But if I'm listening and I'm scrolling a lot on social media, my brain actually gets to a point of it's uncomfortable and I almost need the drug, and
Yep.
it's very hard for me to get back into the gap. And if I'm listening to a lot of podcasts, well, it's like a good movie coming to an end. It's like, oh my
Mm.
God, I just listened to the Radical Health Radio. It was fantastic. And now the episode's done and I have all this excitement about these
Mm.
things and I need something else now. Manja, manja, manja. Give me something else to listen to. I don't want to go actually do what he was talking about on the podcast. I want more
Yeah.
cheap dopamine that's gonna make me feel good and have these ideas.
That's
I
it,
did have a
man. It's the
question.
cheap part of it. Yeah. Please.
I had a question about the gap. You were talking about this before, and I really like how you were prefacing it. And it's something that I work on a lot, and I'm always getting better at it, and I always stumble on it. But when I
Mm.
think of when a moment comes up and maybe someone were to come up to me in the street, um, and say something very mean to me in Spanish. I'm here in Colombia, and maybe it's just like, "Ay, pinche gringo," call me like a freaking gringo, and like, "What are you doing here?" And I could react, but that 1, 2, 3, like, I like to count to 3 in my head. It's something that's worked for me for many, many years. And then what I'm doing in my meditation practice to sit within that gap and find comfort in the gap. I'm curious what you do to practice that because I do believe we're in a time, especially in the Western world, in the US, where people don't even know what the heck this is, and
Mhm.
they're all very, very reactive, and not responsible. Back to
Yes,
rambling.
absolutely. Yes. You have to get out of the mind. The mind is where all of that torture lives, like the story. Like, fuck that guy. Why is he being so mean? I didn't do anything to him. What now you're self-conscious? Like, do all people see me this way? And it's a real wrestling match, right? So the thing that I I was gonna say think about, but it's more of a feel about so often is get out of the mind. And where do you go if you get out of your mind? Well, the only place that I can go if I get out of my mind is to my heart. So what I say is a mantra, what would love do now?
Mm,
What would love do now? Because immediately I can't think my way into that. I can't think my way into what love would do now when I'm angry at this person and I'm kind of I want to be like, and I am. I'm the savage also. I'm like this Buddha and this beast. Like you coming up and saying fuck you, I want to knock your block off. If I live in the head, I feel threatened. I'm like fuck this guy. I'm gonna punch him. I'm gonna headbutt him. You don't know me. But then I say there's the mind. Like what would love do now? And love just opens, you know?
right.
And I'd probably just, if I can stay in that place and I can drop into the heart, I just let that move through me. That's not my stuff, man. I don't combine with it. I let it pass through like bad Chinese food. It's just in one end and out the other. Like it's gone. You know, imagine how much pain that person must be in to be so angry and understanding all the context of that. Oh yeah, like you know, gringo in a foreign country, they're probably mad at us for driving up the prices. Again, now we go back in the mind. It's the seesaw, as opposed
Yeah.
to just forget all of that for a minute. Forget that I'm even a gringo and he's a local. What would love do now? Because at the level of the heart, again, there is no gringo and Spanish guy. There's just two souls. There's just
Mm,
like, oh, far out. There's another one of me in a different experience that's feeling angry right now. Do I have any responsibility to adopt his anger and make it my own and combine with it? I don't think so. Now it's different, of course, if you're being threatened. and you're literally, somebody's closing in on your personal space and your physical being is in harm's way. But there's a big difference between just words and physical threats. And I know some people want to say, well, words are violence, but I think we might be taking it a bit too far if we go down that route. So
Yeah.
it reminds me of something I was told about a long time ago from a teacher who talked about the hollow bone. He said, you must be the hollow bone. And his analogy for that was the bone has structure. It's strong enough, it's sturdy enough to hold the weight of everything around it, and hollow enough to let it all move through. Just let it all move through. That's not my stuff. That's not my karma unless I choose to pick it up. If I pick it up and I combine with it, I've made it my stuff. And that's going to affect me. That's going to kind of like ruin my morning. That's going to take the edge. I was just walking down the street and I was like, it's so beautiful. Look at this day. And then this angry guy is like, and now I'm like, this fucking sucks. I hate it here. I'm going to move. You see how in an instant, right? It could radically transform. But if I'm the hollow
Mm,
bone that just holds the weight of that and lets him move on and it just moves through me, I go right back to being preoccupied with what a wonderful day. And wasn't that an interesting experience? Anyway,
mm,
so, it takes practice. I wasn't always like that by any means, I would have fought right back. I would have gone an ego battle with that guy. It's like
yeah.
an echo. When an
Mm,
echo of pain comes your way, you can choose to continue the echo and you can bounce it back to them and they'll bounce it back to you, or you'll hold it and then you'll go to the next person where you can bounce it to them. And now it just bounces around the whole world, this echo, bing, 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 until it lands with somebody who says, I can digest that. I can hold
mm,
that. And then it's gone. Like, oh, wow, I just metabolized that. So it didn't metastasize in either me or somebody else that I lashed out or the dog that I kicked again. That's what
mm,
that thing is. Just that echo of pain, just running rampant until it finds somebody that's able and aware enough to go, there we go. Let it go. Let it pass.
mm,
Not mine. And then,
mm.
then it's done.
The hollow bone reminds me of this story I heard a while ago, and it's about a man walking down the street, and another man comes up to him, and he starts um, verbally attacking him. And the first man, is just walking, not letting it affect him, and then it gets to a point where it's a lot, and he stops and he looks at the man and he goes, "If I don't accept this negativity, where does it go?" And I think that reminds me of the hollow bone. But I like how you started about speak from the heart as well, because I believe that maybe if you use that story, it can even come off a little bit negative on your own, because it's like, I'm not taking your bullshit, you keep it to yourself. But if you kind of maybe combine that with how can I speak from the heart as well, I think you can really be of service as well, while also not allowing this, because the world is, and especially nowadays, there's a lot going on, and a lot of it could suck you in, could
Mm.
could could bring you in. But it's like, okay, how do I not let it take control of my life? And then how can I offer this love that you're talking about? I really like how you started with that and then went to the hollow bone.
Yes. Well, the heart, for want of a better word, if people and I say if for a reason, like we're all capable of this. It's what we are. We never had a problem when we were 6 months old, 1 year old, 18 months old, being from the heart space. Like we live there, and then we grow up and we forget and we get enculturated and life can take some dumps on us and we get wounded and we get traumas, little and big. And all of this stuff like just slowly starts to shut off the heart and we go up here into the head. And that's the guarding, right? It's the rationalization and it's the logic. But the head is a fear factory so often. I mean, it's a combination of self-preservation and ancient hardwiring in the sense that we evolved in radically different times than we now live. We evolved in environments of mass scarcity, and now we live in relative abundance for most people. So we've got this evolutionary mismatch between our wiring, what our genes expect, what our psychology was built on, and what we're experiencing. And throughout our history, we develop something known as negativity bias or scarcity bias, which means we overweigh potential negative things, and we kind of like let the positive stuff just slide right off us. And that has an evolutionary purpose again, which is you can only be so happy, but you can be very dead. So for 99% of our evolutionary history, it was avoiding not being very dead. You know, the purpose of the race is to procreate and pass on its genes. It had to optimize for not dying. But when you then, you zoom forward 100,000 years and now you live in this environment and you've still got a negativity bias. And now you have access to all the world's worst information about wars and bombing and famine. And you've got taxes and you've got pedophiles on an island somewhere running the world. And you've got also a proclivity to hyper focus on the negative, and you haven't been trained by culture to regulate, and you lost connection to your heart like we all do. Well, that is a recipe for depression, suicidal ideation, fracture, dis-ease, all of the malaise and sickness that we feel. And it's all because we're up here. And the irony of that is we're up here as a psychological retreat. But it's not actually safe to be up there. It's incredibly dangerous because mostly all that lives up there is more fear and more hate and more separation. But we got so scared of the heart because at one point we had an open heart and it got wounded, and we thought that the only way to protect ourselves was to guard it. And the reason that love, when you're in love with someone, whether it's in a temporary moment, like in love is an interesting term, right? Because we think it's reserved for just like long-term romantic relationships. But I believe you can fall into love with people very, very quickly. Romantic, platonic, etc. It being in love is a state. It's like a vibration. It's when you're in your heart. You can be in love with the homies, having a dance on the beach. Doesn't mean you go and bang them. You can be in love with a person in a moment because you meet each other in the place that is not this. Like you see eye to eye, you are in love in that moment. And then of course, like you fall deeply into love with your life partners and such. But the reason love feels so good and right is because it's what we are fundamentally. And
Mm.
the reason fear and hate and anxiety feel so wrong is it's because the direct oppositional force to what we are. Like love is what we are and what we were created from, and hate is the antithesis to that. But most people are living more so from that energy. Separation from self, separation from other, living in hate, living in a world that they think is awful and demonic, and blaming all of those people out there, bonding over the hatred of the outgroup. And that's just it's a really dangerous place to live because it leads to, there's no hopeful end there. There's just no hope in that. So you have to
Mm.
come back to the heart. But that's a long journey. It's a long journey to even open the heart again. When I ask people sometimes when we do retreats or, I'm on a coaching call or something, like, what do you feel? Like, can you feel your heart? Can you connect to that? What would it feel like if you spoke from that place or listened from that place? There's such a block for most people. They can't literally feel it because it's so closed off. It's so guarded. So you have to go through a process of trying to learn that skill again, which is interesting because you're not actually learning something new as much as remembering what you've forgotten. Like it is what you are, but life is lifed, and life is lifed harder for some people than other people. But it's put us in a predicament now where I think the only way out of this is through it. And when I say through it, I don't just mean like tucking our tail between our legs and being like, hopefully this will pass. I mean, through it in a radically different way of being, like a literally different way of being, which means living more from the heart. And what's very interesting about that is we're at a very unique time where it's arguably the hardest to do that than it's ever been. Because not only are we increasing in novelty, we're increasing of the awareness of that novelty and the hyperconnectiveness and the technology, and it all feels like it's reaching this precipice. And what happens when we reach the precipice, I don't know. But I think the only way to navigate it is not with more of this head. It's more of this trust and this love and this heart space. Because if you can really drop into that space too, you realize, you feel it. And feeling is believing. You feel that everything is going to be okay.
Mm.
But if you ask most people now and they're in the head, they don't feel like everything's going to be okay. They think it's fucking bad and it's all going to end. But if you can get to the heart truly, you're not naive. It doesn't make you naive. It doesn't make it like, oh, it's all going to be sunshine and rainbows, but you know that it's going to be okay because you know that love wins. And it's as cliche as it gets, it sounds cheesy sometimes, but it does. And look, whether it's right or wrong, I'm not really concerned about. I'm more concerned with whether it's truthful. And it's way more truthful and helpful for me to be believing that because it allows me to live a more hopeful, happier, more grounded life than being in my head trying to figure this whole thing out and ending up just hating myself, resenting the world, hating the other person that doesn't see the world in the same ideological lens that I do. That's a game I don't want to play.
Yeah, me neither. Um, Earlier you had said, "If you're in your head, you're dead," along those lines, and I see a lot of people are really living in their head right now, and for me, I realize it's easy. I could be in my heart right now on this call with you, and then I can get a phone call, and that phone
Mm,
call could put me right into my head. And I've kind of had this self accountability with myself with this. Now, um, this might be two parts, but lead me to something else I wanted to talk about. One way that I kind of get into my heart is I've been calling it a psychedelic approach to my existence.
mhm,
And what I mean by that is I kind of have Ethan is here speaking with you right now. I see myself over there evaluating myself in this place, in this time, in this world, and kind of having like an exterior or outside perspective of my life. And for me, that's helped. That helps me get into my heart when I can kind of evaluate myself and, like, am I truly dancing through life right now, or am I living from my head and is the anxieties of life controlling me? So taking this kind of exterior outside perspective helps me actually get into my heart. I'm curious if you have a similar view or a different view on how you can kind of radically get into your heart right away when maybe something has brought you to your head and you have that awareness like I'm totally in my head right now. I got to get
mhm,
back to my heart.
mhm. The mantra that I talked about earlier is not just used for times of challenge. It's I try to use it very, very often, which is what would love do now? Because I think it's always the answer, and it kind of is the mental invitation to open a curiosity loop of like, oh, would love really be sitting here right now, judging myself to death over the fact that I said something stupid, or I shouldn't have said that email, or I messed up that deal. That's not what love would do now. So there's this idea that you can't beat the mind with the mind. And I don't fully buy into that
Mm,
because I think like meditation and those kinds of like reframes are a way of doing that, but it's useful in the sense that a lot of the time trying to think your way out of a thinking problem is folly. It's like trying to snort your way out of a cocaine problem. You're trying to save yourself using the same poison that got you here. So just what you have to do in my experience is like at least open a curiosity loop that there's something different. And I think that's kind of what you're doing here when you're seeing this. It's almost like a disassociation. Like I go outside of my body, look at myself in the third person, because that is literally getting out of your head. Literally, because now you're looking at it, you're not no longer identified in the soup. You're not like super wrapped up in it. You need some kind of distance. So whatever it is, like whether it's jumping out of my body, observing from a bird's eye view, using perspective, using a mantra, it's a pattern interrupt to just stop this friggin' thing for a moment. Just stop for a moment. Now, if you don't do anything in that moment and you're in that gap, you'll just go right back to it. You just go right back to the shame game, the blame game. But if you then have whatever you do next, that's when you can really drop in. So for me, it's kind of boring and it's cliche and it's old, but it works as far as I can see, which is just breathing.
mm,
And for me, it's like because I think I'm very tactile and I think I'm quite visual. So the mantra is helpful, but even when I breathe, like if I'm in public, it's harder to do this. Just don't want to be the person standing in the middle of the room, like holding hands on chest. But like if I'm in my office or something like that, I'll literally do that. I'll just put two hands on my chest, and when I breathe, I'll breathe into that space. And if I'm out in public or something, I will visualize nostrils in my heart space. It sounds crazy, but I'm purring like a visual cue with a feeling. And very quickly I can feel just the volume and the tension and the anxiety. And then I'll feel other things slightly shift. I'll feel my shoulders drop ever so slightly. I'll feel my face relax ever so slightly. And they'll just be like reaffirmations that like, oh yeah, you were quite tense just now. Like, and where were you? Well, you were in your head. You were thinking so much and everything kind of went. And then I'm like, oh, I realized something. I had my pattern interrupt. I had my cue, and then I drop in. It's literally a dropping in, right? Because everything like the heart feels like it literally sits below the head. So it feels like you have to drop in. You're up here. You're kind of lost. You're ungrounded. You're spiraling. It's like anchoring back into the body, using tactile sensations like touch, And sometimes in the energy of you can't change the mind with the mind, if you want to change your if you want to change your trait, change your state kind of thing, sometimes that's where movement can be really helpful.
Yeah.
Whether that's, movement of energy through something like a breath of fire practice, it doesn't have to be like meditative, breaths, or it could be using whatever you've got. If you just want to rip some push-ups or some burpees or something, just like shake it off you for a minute. There's an energetic residue. So I use things like that. And then what I have found, and I think this is the hopeful thread for people, is that you are never none you're never gonna stop getting lost in your head. It is, again, it is part of being human. If you do, we're probably gonna start calling whoever you are the next Messiah. They're gonna call you the next, "Oh, Christ really did come back, and it took the form as this guy called Ethan," because that's why those people were enlightened masters. That's why they could conduct miracles, because they weren't playing by the same rules of the game that we're playing by. They weren't losing that thread. They were consciously staying in love. They were constantly in
Mm,
Christ consciousness. They were able to do something that we haven't done for at least a long time. But they serve as a reminder of what is possible, and we can taste it. And the more that we taste it, the more that we know that it's right there, just like hanging over our shoulder, like a positive little pull back. And I think life is practice. And the more you practice being there, the more it does become your default setting. Or at the very least, when you do get lost in the source of the mind, the path back is a lot quicker. So that's
mm,
been, and I've even seen that in my age, and I would say growing wisdom, although some people would challenge that. It's like I've needed actually to rely on techniques and modalities less, not because they're not useful, but because the amount of reps and inertia that is behind them has allowed my default mode to be more from that space. And I don't know how to quantify it. And this is the problem, your whoop's not going to tell you how much you were in your heart versus your head. It's very subjective. Some days are better than others. But I feel like a good portion of the time now I can be, living from that heart space. And because when I recognize palpably the difference with when I've gone in my head, and it's often unconscious at first, but then I'll realize it's either fidgety or tight or whatever it is, that it's an invitation right back to it. And we've just got to keep doing the reps. It's like a life meditation. When you sit in meditation, you notice when your mind has wandered and you bring it back to the breath. This is like just meditation off the cushion. And the going, losing the thought is when you've gone in your head, and the breath is coming back to something like the heart space and seeing how long you can hold it. How long can you stay there?
mm. Yeah, it's like you've created this unconscious competence with getting to that heart space. I get asked often how I'm calm. Like I'm a pretty calm guy, and people ask me, "Hey, Ethan, how are you so calm?" And it's funny sometimes because of how much work I've had to do to get there.
Oh yeah.
When I was younger, I it took me a lot longer than the other kids to read. I was flipping desks. I was putting anger management classes. And so it took a lot of work for me to get and shed that version of Ethan and to realize like, hey, this doesn't make me happy. I'm totally in my head. How can I get more in my heart? So it's been a journey and I can kind of relate to that. I find some things for me now are just unconsciously competent where I don't need to go do shamanic breath work for 30 minutes every single day. Now, I will do mostly every day a little box breathing, but 30
Mhm.
seconds to a
Mhm.
minute of box breathing, and it really gets me into my heart
Mhm.
rapidly. Whereas maybe in the past it took 20 minutes. So I want to emphasize what you're saying, Steve, for the listeners, because it might take, um, Jay Shetty in his book, Think Like a Monk, he talks about this as taking a vacation with meditation. So sometimes to get back into this unconscious competence that you're talking about, it might require a deep dive into it for a
Yes.
week, for a month. You might need to put a lot of love and effort into it, but it will get easier and you won't have to
Yes.
do as much work to it. It's like the gyms. In the beginning, you're gonna have to do a lot. You're gonna have to stretch a lot more than you will
Yeah.
maybe in 6 months. You're gonna have to do a lot more work. It's gonna be harder, but it gets easier. And
Yeah.
that's something to look forward to, I believe.
I think so. And I think it's, if we're doing the hard work now, it sets us up for better aging. The thing I think about a lot these days is like the war on aging, like fighting aging, resisting it, pushing back against it. And it seems folly to me to try and resist something as fundamental as like the law of gravity. Like you're meant to age, and you can either resist it or you can let it work you over. You can transform with it. I think that we are of nature, and I think that everything in nature changes. And you can either acknowledge that you are part of nature and you are supposed to change too, and that change is beautiful. And yes, your eyes are going to get some more crow's feet. Your body's not going to be as hot as it once was. You might get, if you're lucky enough, you might be 85 at one point and incontinent. But at the same time as the body is changing so rapidly that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. And you see that we do all kinds of things to avoid that. You know, whether it's Botox and fake boobies or hair transplants or breaking our femurs and growing ourselves by 2 inches and you name it, that the spirit, the soul remains ageless. It doesn't
Yeah.
age. Like that spark behind it doesn't age. And maybe what the aging process is like a softening of all of this stuff to get more in touch with that, the wisdom underneath it. You know, there's a reason we have or have had, historically speaking, like wise elders in the tribe that hold space, kind of, you know, that old wizard or witch, or whatever you want to call them, sitting around the fire, passing on the stories, like giving the wisdom. And only in the last couple of 100 years, I feel like we've really lost that. I mean, we don't have elders, we have olders. We've hidden them away as like an inconvenience, and we don't want to acknowledge death. We're terrified of it, and that's probably because of our relationship to it. We think it's an ending instead of a new beginning. So there's a lot to investigate there, but
Mm.
there's wisdom in change, and it all starts now. Like I often try and remind people that you are living in your future, and the reason I'm trying to point them to that is if you feel good about your trajectory now, then you're probably going to be okay. Time is a magnifier, you know, but if you feel pretty shitty about your trajectory and you just think that magically your future is going to be much better, you're lying to yourself, and that's an uncomfortable truth to face. Like you are living in your future. Time is an illusion. Tomorrow never comes. Like what you are hoping to experience one day, you've got the seeds for it in your hands right now. It's a trajectory thing. Be less concerned with your current results, more concerned with your current trajectory, because things obviously take time. So you can apply that to whatever, you know, career, like, you know, you're going to ascend. And historically, from a data perspective, the number one correlate for how much money a person makes in their lifetime is age. So typically, yes, you're going to get older, you're going to make more money. All of that is good. But if your trajectory on more holistic things that I think we're talking about right now
Yeah.
is not something that is like vibing with you, then you really need to have a good, hard, honest conversation about how you get yourself to a position as quickly as you can where you feel amazing about your trajectory. Because I think you're getting a glimpse into your future in this very moment. So whether that's, you know, the awareness stuff, because you realize, holy shit, I'm wasting 6 hours of my day scrolling on reels. Like if you think one day you're just gonna snap out of that, no, you need to fix that now. That's going to get worse. These technologies are going to get better at hijacking your information. If you're having a little habit with this substance or that substance or pornography or, oh, I'm gaming a little too much, whatever it is right now, and you're just under the illusion that, you know, I'm going to get over it though. Uh-uh. No, it's now. It's literally now or never, because you're just going to keep kicking that proverbial can down the road until you're 60 years old wondering where all the time went, or it gets so bad that it forces a reactive solution. Like, oh, wow, my wife left me. Oh, wow, I'm having a midlife crisis. Or the doctor called me and he got my blood panel. And if I don't change my diet, he said I'm going to have a heart attack in 5 years. So many people are reactive with their health and their life. And I think we should be trying to be much more proactive with it.
Mm. Steve, do you teach the current results versus trajectory often, or is that something that kind of just came out right now?
Now, I talk about it a lot, especially with clients.
Mm. Yeah, that's really beautiful. I really like how you went into that. I can see that serving a lot of people. So for the listeners, double down on that and get tapped in with Steve more on that. I wanted
It's
to
kind of
ask.
like really quickly. I made a reel on this
Yeah,
yesterday
please.
in the diet space, which is one of the places I talk about. You know, and one of the ideas I had yesterday, and it came up, and just made a pretty organic reel about it. Is based on this premise, which is you would be better off having a 6 out of 10 diet that you can do for 10 years, as opposed to a 10 out of 10 diet that you can only do for 30 days. And too often in our modern world, people are optimizing for intensity and not consistency. So the 6 out of 10 diet doesn't feel sexy enough for people. It's not good enough. It's not like powerful enough. It needs to be 10 out of 10. It's like all or nothing. The problem with the all or nothing mentality is so often it results in nothing because it results in burnout. And that is like, and that's where it gets interesting because somebody that's like very fresh on their like, I'm changing my entire life right now. How do you feel about your trajectory? They're like, I'm fucking fired up. If I carry on this way, I'm going to win an Ironman. I'm going to be jacked. I'm going to be rich. I'm going to be sexy. But then that person 30 days from now is burned out and they've
Yeah.
like rejected the whole thing. 75 Hard is a very good example of this. As much
I
as it can
was
teach
literally
people
just thinking
some
that as you're
really
talking
good
about
things,
this.
it collapses so many people too, right? Because probably what we need instead of 75 hard is like 365 extra medium, something like that, like something that you can repeat year on year. The amount of people to do 75 hard, even the ones that are successful, basically like fucking never doing that again. It puts strain on themselves, strain on the relationship. So like I see the utility and value in it, but I'm also like, just be also realistic. Like, don't be foolish. You know yourself. You're not supposed to change every aspect of your life overnight, starting right now, and do it all perfectly. And if you adopt that mentality, as so many people do, and as social media tries to tell you and show you that you should do, you're shooting yourself in the foot. So, turn it down a couple of notches, almost make it a little bit less sexy and a little more easier than you want to make it, but optimize for the long-term game and just build that habit slowly over time. And then when I see you in 30 days and you're like locking in, how do you feel about your trajectory then? I feel pretty good, I feel like I could do this forever. That's when the results are going to come.
Yeah, that was huge for me. I was talking to someone. It's funny. I laughed at the 75 hard because right before you said that, I was thinking about it.
Yep.
But I was at this rooftop sauna and cold plunge place here in Medellin, really beautiful place. But my friend Andres, he's doing 75 hard right now, and it's just his third time doing it. And he was talking about how it burnt him out so bad last year. And he's taking a little bit more of a better holistic approach to it this time. Like, do you want to do it with me? And I just look at him. I'm like, absolutely not, man.
Yeah, no
I've
thanks.
I've set up my life where I pretty much just live about like the medium. Like you said, I am consistently medium. I work out 6 to 7 days a week, some days harder than others. I eat relatively good and I avoid things that I don't do. But it's taken me a while because in my 20s, I definitely went down the
Yes.
overindulging in things. And it's like, okay, I need to go hard on this. We used to do 90-day blitzes actually when I
Oof.
was big in the sales world. So we do these 90-day blitzes where we would work for 90 days knocking doors in California, selling solar panels. And throughout that time, we're also following the strictest diet. We're waking up at 5 a.m. We'll come 20 days into the 90-day blitz. We're usually going to hit a bar at 12 o'clock in the afternoon because we're so
Yep.
fucking burnt out.
Yep.
Just
That's
Yeah, it's funny.
it's classic, man.
What I wanted to ask you before was your thought, and I wrote this down yesterday as I was thinking about you. I'm curious your thoughts on generational wealth and how you define that word wealth. And I want to preface it. I'm not necessarily talking about money, and I don't think that you think I am. I'm curious, and I think this is a unique pivot because we were talking about your children and kind of this view that you have on that. So curious your thoughts there.
Yeah, generational wealth. The first thing that comes to mind is literally a family. If you want to leave your mark on the world, whatever that means, legacy, like leaving mini versions of you is pretty cool. It's still, I think, when I think about that, quite egotistical. Like, I must continue, I must leave my legacy. Like, why? Okay, but if you are going to do it, making little people and trying to raise them into a world to be other good people, I think about this idea of leaving everything better than you found it. And I think that ultimately means life at the end of the day. When you leave, hopefully that's very long time away in the future after a good, happy life. Like, is the world a better place for you being in it? Did you try to just like be good and pour energy into it? Hopefully the answer is yes. And then did you amplify that by creating other people that are following in your footsteps and hopefully trying to birth this new earth? That seems like really wealthy to me. But to get more practical about it, I love this idea of rich in the currency of happiness, rich in the currency of meaning, rich in the currency of presence. Because when we think about wealth and being rich, it always just comes back to money. Everything's about money. Right? That our entire culture is obsessed with money. And there's nothing wrong with money, but money only solves money problems. Money
Mhm.
doesn't create wealth. Money doesn't even create generational wealth. And I'll tell you this firsthand by people that I've seen and people that I've worked through that would make more money and be on paper wealthier than I am in 100 lifetimes. They'll probably make my annual salary in 1 hour in the morning on a toilet. And they're not wealthy because they're not happy and their family is broken and they are splintered. And they might say generational wealth because what they're doing is setting their child up with a trust fund and a home here and a retirement plan already. But they're also at what cost? Like so often, the cost for that was not being around, being absent, fractured relationships, tons of pressure, or the other side of this, which is like no pressure because everything is figured out for you, everything is taken care of for you. So you become, I mean, how many times have we seen it with like childhood stars and things like that, where they get given the world? The world is
Yeah.
your oyster, but you're 15 years old. You don't know how to do that. They so often end up in dysfunctional relationships with people or with substances. So when I think about wealth, I think that, money is a small slice of that pie. But because money only solves money problems, to me, it's like an amplifier. It allows you to hopefully do more of what you love. And I really do. I like this idea that we call money currency, and currency is an electric term. So it's an energetic term, like money is energy. And that because it's energy, you're either like working with the flow of it or against the flow of it. And look, there's some unfortunate events sometimes, like a beaver come and builds a dam in your money flow, and you're like, why am I drowning over here? Like, improve the flow. But if you at least frame it in that way, I think it's healthy, because if you do reach somewhat of a proverbial drought, sorry, it asks you, well, what am I putting my energy into? And am I in support of life? I believe that life supports that which supports life. And energy is one of the ways that we get that currency flowing back in our lives. So sometimes that's a nice reframe. And other times it's also just recognizing that money is an amplifier. So if you had more money, what would you do with it? And I think that the whole like money is the root of all evil and things like that comes from the fact that we've got so much wounding in our culture and our history, where people have kind of gathered exorbitant amounts of wealth and money and done really evil things with them. But I don't necessarily think that that makes money evil. I think it's the acceleration of what was already inside of that person. If money's an amplifier and you're a ball bag, when you're a uber rich ball bag, you're a giant fucking ball bag. If you're a really good person and you get a bunch of money, I think, and I don't know because I don't have a bunch of money, I'm wealthy in other ways, I do okay, but it's not like, what would happen if you had Tony Robbins level of wealth? As an interesting thought experiment, what would you do? And the question then is, why would I want Tony Robbins level of wealth? I often wrestle with this. If, let's say, if I saw $1 million in my bank account, like I literally saw that number, what would happen to me? Would I then seem to fall into the trap that so many other people do, which is, wow, 2 million would be nice. Ooh, what about 5 million? 10 million, growth. Because I feel as though, and this would be my hope, that if I saw that number, I would be so happy and content knowing that that is so much and so many other people have so little, that I can stop this relentless pursuit and acquisition for more, because that's a game you can never win. There's always going to be somebody with more zeros after the name. There's always going to be somebody with a bigger yacht. And I just wonder, like, Gabor Mate had this line that you can never get enough of something that almost works. And money seems to be a very unique one in that. If you poll people on the street, what the perfect amount of money would be for them, where they would feel happy, typically, almost always, they say it's about 2 times what they're currently earning. That's like the average answer. So if you're earning 100 grand in your head, you're like, oh, if I made 200, I'd be so set, dude. Like I'd be set. I'd be so happy at that number. But similarly, if you're earning 500K, you're like, a million. I think I'd be good at a million. But then if you're at a million, 2 million. If you're at 10 million, 20 million. And then I think there's a certain threshold that it must cross somewhat of it's more of like a moral and ethical consideration and argument for the concentration of that much wealth especially if you're not using it to be purely philanthropic and help other people, but you're just playing an ego game of being, the richest guy at the boat club or something. So money's an interesting one for me. It's not that I think I have a pretty healthy relationship with money, but I don't necessarily pursue it. I don't necessarily care about it to the degree that it allows me to live a relatively good life with my children. I live a very simple life. I have a very low materialism set point. I drive a 2017 car with 150,000 miles in it, and I'll ride it until it turns into dust. Like, I want the land. I want the opportunities. I want the time and location freedom. I want to do work that I feel good about. I wouldn't trade that for a salary triple mine right now. I just couldn't, because it wouldn't be in alignment with what wealth means to me, which is so many other things than just monetary value. It's a
Yeah.
lot of those other things I just alluded to.
Yeah, I can really connect with you on that. And my relationship with that has changed because when I was younger, supposedly I told my mom when I was 3 years old that one day I'm going to be a millionaire. I said it with like this
Wow.
accent.
3-year-old millionaire. Look at you.
Yeah, and I don't know if my mom was just smart at programming me and she made that up, or if I actually said that. I still don't know, but that stuck with me growing up, and I had always thought that I wanted money, and I envisioned myself in a three-piece suit, finishing work on Wall Street, going to get a martini, and driving my Porsche home to my smoking hot blonde wife, and I learned quickly around the age of 20 that that is not what I wanted. What I really wanted is a fulfilling life. I wanted fulfillment. I wanted meaning, and that's what I've spent, I guess, the last 12 years seeking. And money has been maybe a little bit of a part of that, but I realize that I don't need much money to live the life that I really enjoy and want to live. It's quite easy for me to meet. If we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's quite easy for me to meet my needs and to ascend up that ladder. Now, of course, if I were to uh, um, get millions and millions of dollars, well, it would probably just allow me and I believe it will allow me the ability, and you as well, to give back more, to do what we're already
Hmm.
doing on a higher scale. Because
Bingo.
back to your point earlier, and I watched the movie Eyes Wide Shut the other night. I'm not sure if you saw that, but um, that's a crazy, crazy movie about the ultra rich and this weird shit that they're doing. But for the people that And usually people that have those dark triad traits, those dark triad personality traits are the one that it's easy for them to achieve those levels of wealth that for maybe you and me, it's like, like the why. Why suffer for that? Why go through this for that? Um, and that amplifies that darkness within
Hmm.
them, but then you get a guy like Tony Robbins, and I was watching a podcast of him last night, and he's talking about he has this deep desire to continue to get more and more and more, and he's had to work with this in his life, but it's for more good. Okay, I,
Yeah.
I fed 1 billion people. Now I want to feed 5 billion people.
Yeah.
So it's interesting the type of people and how we view these type of things, whether it's money or generational wealth.
Mm.
Because when I think of wealth, and the reason I asked you that, I was having this internal conversation recently, and I was talking about, I was thinking about deathbed literature, and I was thinking about if I was on my deathbed, what are the things that I'd want to maybe leave behind, or the last bit of wisdom I'd have for my family. And I actually wouldn't want to leave them with millions and millions of dollars if that's where I'm at the end of my life, because when we think of this, um, hard times create strong men create easy times create weak men. Maybe all that money would lead to not the family that I'd be proud of,
Yep.
but to give
Yep.
them the wisdom and to give them the stories of how I lived my life. I find that to me the wealth that I would want to leave behind. I almost want to give all the money away and say, okay, here's a book. Figure it out.
Yeah. Like, the goal wouldn't be to leave your children a kingdom of castles, but to leave them the proverbial keys to the kingdom where that they could build the kingdom themselves in any given lifetime, because they've been equipped with the lessons and the love and the resiliency. And that, yeah, like generational wealth might just be something like on your deathbed that your children are there connected to you, loving you, and just being so grateful and so thankful that, like, dad, you were the most special person in my life. Like, there's
Mm,
nothing that's going to be worth more than that in those final moments. There's no amount of money, there's nothing. And there's probably, whether they're listening to this, or there's certainly people out there that got left the largest sum of wealth you can imagine, but they never knew the father. They never got to spend time with them, or they had a dysfunctional relationship with them. And what's that wealth worth to them? It won't mean anything to them. And all they will want is what they didn't get. And that's kind of like the grass is always green, and we do this, right? It's always like, if only I had this, or if it's, but it's so often not the case. I think, what we're really craving at the end of the day is the cliche stuff. It's connection, it's longing, it's love, it's the family unit. It's what has been who we are forever, and it will continue to be that, I think. Even as people rail and say, that's not it, or, maybe some people truly do believe you can, hedonism yourself into bliss for forever and just make more and more and more. And that's a fruitful life. And again, if it serves them, who am I to tell them that they're wrong? But I have a feeling that it's not. And I've seen too many people talk about that at the end of the life, that the things that eventually everybody seems to come through when they've ascended the mountain is, oh yeah, they were right. All the cliches are true. Money won't buy you happiness. It's really about, who's in the home, not how big the home is. It is really all that stuff. And it's kind of heartbreaking in some senses that, especially since the COVID era, 2020, we had the biggest redistribution and concentration of wealth in our entire history. We created more billionaires in those few years than had even existed before. And now we've got something like, the top 2% of wealth owns more than the combined 98% bottom percent of all the world's wealth. And it is interesting to think about what would happen if that 2% were truly altruistic. Not just like one person, like a Tony Robbins or a handful of them, but of the few thousand billionaires that now exist. A billionaire. That's so many zeros, we can't even comprehend it. And there's a few thousand of them now. What would happen if they were a little more altruistic and not fueled on this just acquisition of more, and actually created businesses that were about doing good and didn't put all that money back into the military industrial complex so we can buy more oil to fuel more tanks, to go to more countries to get more oil, to fuel more tanks, to buy more weapons, and just repeat this batshit crazy cycle where nobody's winning. Nobody's winning.
mm,
So that's more of the the dystopian, like, or utopian solution is what if, and I think they're important questions to ask, because if we stop asking them, then we'll never know, because no one will ever challenge it in that sense. And if we are to have anything like a future, as cliche as it sounds, it's only in the children, and it is only in children that are raised slightly differently, to question the status quo, to redefine questions like, what does generational wealth mean? What does success mean? Because for so often, until relatively recently, nobody asked those questions because they were just given to you, and life was so scarce that you didn't really have time. This is the beautiful burden of being a person with first world problems, is to ask about what the nature of life is, and what is purpose, and what is meaning, and how do I want to live it? Because up until just a blip ago, you didn't really have a choice. So we're in a very interesting and precarious but also wonderful moment too. Like, it's full of opportunity. Like, I know it feels heavy and dark sometimes, don't get me wrong. I sit in that sometimes and it just shatters me. And then I come
yeah.
right out of it and I'm like, but wow, yeah, what a time. Like,
Mm,
and like I said at the beginning of this call, I believe I chose this. I think I chose this. And then I laugh and I'm like, why the fuck would you choose this? And then I'm like, because it's full of opportunity, and it's full of experience, and it's full of the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, like the worst of humanity and the best of it. And that is life to me. I'm wearing the yin and yang symbol on my shirt. I could talk about this symbol. This symbol, by the way, I could talk about for hours. It means so much to me. Some people think it's just something you see in a Chinese food shop or in the restaurant, the local karate dojo in your city, but it is fundamentally representative of balance. And I think that it holds the old wisdom keys to something like getting back to where we need to go to. And right now we're desperately out of balance. But the way we might get back to it, and I always like to be hopeful, is through conversations, through questions, through a mass awakening, for want of a better word, because the systems that got us here are wholly incapable of tending to what they've released and, feeding the masses and loving the masses and bringing the masses together. So it's an interesting time, bro.
Yeah. I last year, I think I told you this in our last conversation, but I did DMT for the first time. And at the end of my experience, I saw the yin and the yang symbol in the tent, and it was at the top. And I just went down this very philosophical thought loop, and it made so much sense to me, which felt like 24 hours of me just
Mm,
contemplating the duality of existence, and it
mhm,
was so interesting. So ever since that moment, because I was like how you just described it before, I was like, "Oh, my dad used to have this in the dojo in our basement," and yeah, it's just the yin and yang. But now, it means so much more to me because of that experience that I had. So maybe as time
mhm.
goes on, I'm gonna ponder on it more. It
Yeah,
mean more
there's
to
a
me in
there
my
is
life.
there's a lot to say about it, and the tease is there's a reason that Jesus spoke in parables and stories and metaphors. There's a reason that Jung spoke about the power of archetypes and mythic symbols. It's because that they can pull out of us things that words cannot. This symbol comes from the East. It comes from ancient China, and it was really popularized, for want of a better word, by the philosopher Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao Te Ching, which is a remarkable wisdom teachings book. And depending on what translation you read, basically the first line of the Tao Te Ching is the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. The Tao that can be spoken is not the Tao. It's this idea that we can't touch the ineffable. We cannot, but symbols represent something deeper that's almost in our DNA and our bones. And the circle of the yin and the yang represents so wonderfully is, firstly, it's circular, which is a fundamental law of life. There's no hierarchy in a circle. There's no top and bottom, no left and right, no up and down, no beginning or end. Another mythic symbol, very much in that similar vein, is the Ouroboros, which is the snake that eats its own tail. And if you've ever seen that, the head continues to eat the tail. And you're like, oh, it's going to devour itself. But as the head eats more of the body, the tail just grows longer. It's again this invitation that there is no beginning or end. And if you take a circle and you twist it in half, it becomes like a letter 8, also known as the infinity symbol. It is all there is. There all there was. But the circle of life, we call it the circle of life. We don't call it the square of life or the hierarchy of life. The circle of life is literally contained by essential balance. And if the balance becomes so desperately out of balance to the point where it's beyond saving, the entire thing would crumble and life would cease to exist. And the yin and yang is represented famously by the white fish and the black fish, the masculine and the feminine. And within the white fish, there is the dot of the black. And within the black fish, there is the dot of the white, which shows us that within the masculine, there is feminine that needs to be nurtured. Within the feminine, there's masculine that needs to be nurtured. And that modern culture, just for want of a better word, has become hyper masculinized. It's become too much white fish. So the black fish, interestingly, in the Taoist philosophy of the world, represents the feminine, and it's dark because it acquires resources. It brings things into it like a black hole. It sucks things into it. Literally, like a woman, she is the chalice to receive. She receives and draws in. If you were black in the sun and you go outside, it concentrates the heat. It is like a suck for energy. And it is, associated with restorative things and nature in particular. And I feel that even as far back as the dawn of our kind of religious institutions, we have been taught to demonize and fear the darkness. The people that worship nature and use the plants, they were called witches. You notice they never call it wizardcraft. It's always witchcraft. It was always associated with the feminine. And it's because the unawakened masculine fears the feminine. It fears nature. It fears the darkness, and it's taught us to fear the darkness. We actually say, oh, that's so dark. That's so wrong. That's so black. It's black and white. It's dark versus light. When realistically, it's not dark at all. And it is the darkness that serves the light and gives it polarity. So the culture has been kind of hyper masculinized in every single sense of the word. If we look at the individual, the way we live is more masculine. It's more outward. It's more penetrative. It's more reflective. Like even if we think of our physical practices, the yang is the masculine. The yang would be associated with things like moving, thinking, breathing, go, 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 like the expenditure of energy, the catabolism, if you will, and the yin, the acquisition of resources, the sleeping, the feeding, the hydration, the nutrition, those are the anabolic rebound. So the masculine actually breaks things down. It's very catabolic. The yin in the rebound is where all the gains are made. In the gym, when you do your CrossFit workout, it's incredibly catabolic. You just destroy your body. It's all masculine energy, like fucking destruction. When you nurture and you get back into the yin and you sleep and you drink and you eat, all of those energy acquisition things pull back in to create balance. If you get
Mm.
too out of balance, if you're too catabolic, too masculine, and not enough yin, no acquisition, your diet's crap, you're undersleeping, you're going to burn out. But now take that and apply it to the philosophy of our systems that run the world, the way we farm. There's no system in nature. There is no system in nature that is out of balance. Everything is ran on systems and cycles that honor the seasons. But our agricultural farming models and mass feeding of people has become a purely masculine extractive protocol. We just take, we rape the soils, then we spray the soils, and we poison the food. We spray poison on the food to stop bugs eating the food, and then we're the ones that turn around and then eat them and poison ourselves in the process and wonder why we're all so sick, and we're not putting back into the land, we're not nurturing the land. There's nothing feminine about it. And then you look at our institutions that run the world, they're ran by men. They have been ran by men for eons. And this isn't a invitation to flip the patriarchy on its head and say go to a matriarchy, because that would cause new problems. Although I will say, I doubt that if women ran the world, we'd be blowing innocent people up with giant machines and, things like that, because I just don't think mothers could do that to other innocent people the way that the fractured masculine can. But it's about
Mm.
balance again. It's not about flipping the paradigm as much as integrating it. And right now, women don't have a seat at the table. We pretend they do through things like DEI, but let's be honest, they don't even have a foot in the door. 99% of the Fortune 600 or whatever they call them companies are run by men. All of the real leaders in all of the institutions of power is run by men. And there's nothing wrong with men. Obviously, I'm a man. The problem is the kind of man that gets to that level. The kind of weak, uninitiated, unawakened masculine that wants control and wants domination and fears the other and fears the feminine and treats it as something like an inconvenience. A lot of these people don't even think women should vote. That's how insecure they are. They don't even think they should vote. They just literally, you are designed to be at home and raise babies and cook me dinner, and that's all you have to offer. And you observe systems in nature. There are so many hives in nature where it's the queen bee or the queen ant. And what the masculine does is the workers that protect. They nurture, they protect, and they create the safety and the ability for the queen to create life, to be the mother. And Mother Nature, the mother of mothers, is currently distraught through our awful extractive practices. The mother is not honored, and we think that we run things because we've bought into these tropes that men are the leaders. Well, is that out of design or is that out of necessity? And maybe we made not a whole mistake, because there's some truth in that, but the mistake that we just took all whitefish and we've started to gobble up the blackfish, and now we're paying the consequences for that. And if we don't right it very quickly, the circle that sustains life itself is going to collapse in on itself. It is not going to be the circle of life for much longer. And I think
Mm.
that's what the revolution that we're really craving is, more integration. And like I said, I could talk about the yin and yang for a long time, but that's just a teaser.
That was awesome. Back to what we were talking about earlier about being in our head and being in our heart. Would you say the masculine is totally up here, and then
1000%. Yes.
the bringing
Yeah.
that feminine is tapping into that heart center?
The masculine is very logic. It's very thinking oriented. It's very much about a plan. Now, of course, none of those things are bad in isolation. But if that's all you do and you devoid yourself of the feminine qualities, which are more feeling, more intuitive, more tapped in, more knowing, more receptive, then of course you're not balanced. And even women that have so masculine and feminine, man and woman, a man typically will be more dominant in his masculine but needs to nurture the feminine. And if he doesn't, he'll usually just be all about the macho go 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 do. He won't be a human being, he'll be a human doing, and he'll lose those feminine elements within him, like creative pursuits. He'll probably stop singing and dancing and enjoying art and reading poetry and literature because he's just a man, and men just don't do that. We think and we do and we create and we fucking just like fucking go for it. But similarly, because culture has become what it has, women who predominantly should be in the feminine have become overly masculinized. The whitefishes consume them so much from the inside of their own inert capacity and capabilities that they're even losing their divine power. They're losing their own intuition because they're in systems that were never built to support them. At the
Mm,
dawn of the basically the industrial revolution, we moved to a complete system that ignored any inconveniences that women presented to the system. And you know what inconveniences are? The most natural thing in the world. It's very inconvenient to the system that women get pregnant and have babies and are basically out of the workforce for a year. It's very inconvenient that they run on a 28-day cycle where they are essentially 4 different women throughout the course of a month. Whereas men, we're diurnal. We're on a 24-hour cycle. We're very predictable. And the entire system is built around us and that efficiency. But now, because of the cultural powerhouses that we've got in the developed West, we can't just afford to have men working. We're not a brawn-based economy anymore. We're a brain-based economy anymore. And we realize that women can do this too. So we try to just plug and play them into the systems that have been built for men. And it's causing unbelievable burnout. Like, women burn out clinically 80% more than men do.
mhm.
And it causes all of the manner of issues. Like, we could get into population collapse and reproduction rates right now because they're forced into this workplace. It burns them out. They become jaded. Most men don't, most women don't like men, and they blame the patriarchy. Men are disempowered by the patriarchy because most of us are looking around saying, like, well, I mean, I know you think we belong to the patriarchy, but we're also not benefiting from this apparent patriarchy that we're supposed to, be like reaping all the benefits from too, because it's not just the patriarchy. It is represented as that because it's men that make a lot of these decisions, but it's the dominator culture. It's not just because it's men. It's unfortunately the way that it went, and it's concentrated power in the hands of many powerful men from many powerful families at the expense of almost everybody to the benefit of the few, those 1%ers, those 2%ers. But because that's the game we're playing, again, we currently are all whitefish, and it is trying to gobble up the entirety of the blackfish. And there's a
And
little bit of that womb space left. There's a little bit of that seed of creation left. There's a little bit of a dying mother that is like, I am here under your feet. See me, love me, honor me. And the call for men is to not perpetuate those harms, is to be reverent to the feminine, to protect the feminine, to nurture the queen bees, not to think like, shut up, you're inconvenient, you shouldn't even vote, cook me a steak. And that's what we've had for so long, and it's going to end us if we can't pull our heads out of our ass.
yeah, I agree, and it's really refreshing to hear your take on that because it's allowing a little creative of thought for me right now. And one thing that I think about a lot is this Western world, and I'm in Colombia right now, and the culture is very different here. There's actually a lot of healthy feminine energy here in Colombia, very very healthy feminine energy here. But in the West, there's this idea that we need to get women back in the kitchen, right? You hear this a lot. And I think there's a total misconception of what this feminine energy is and where it's most useful. One thing that I love about females, and I've always had female friends, and I love this about my relationships, is the seeking of wisdom. They're so intelligent, and we just have to know how to get that wisdom from them. Sometimes they need a little bit of um, help with implementation. And that's where the masculine comes in, right? Like they
Bingo.
have all this beautiful intuitional wisdom, but they need the masculine to support to implement it. So that's where the harmony comes in that beauty. They're not meant to just, no, don't go to work, don't vote, and go in the house and cook me a steak when I come home. It's like, no, how can we work together to create this beautiful harmonization?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
which is, yeah, it's the yin and the yang. So I'm
There's so
really
much
hearing you on
more,
that.
there's so much more intuitive and smart than we are. But if you play from the level of the head, you can't see that. Oh, but what about IQ and the majority of PhDs are men? That's all nonsense. It's just because you're looking and filtering it through that lens of whatever you think that is: productivity, status, success. Realistically, women, unfortunately, have been done a disservice. I really think, and if you want to understand what a powerful awakened woman is like, watch what a woman can do when she's supported and held fully by the masculine. They will amplify the masculine to unbelievable heights. They'll take you further, so much further than you ever thought possible. Just in their presence, man. They don't even need to do anything because they are so tapped into their being. They're so much closer. You know what's very interesting? It's reminded me of a talk I was in once with an old yogi, from India, and they were talking about the historical context of yoga. And some woman brought it up. She was kind of like more from that angry feminist energy. Like, for the longest time, women weren't allowed to do yoga in India. And she was kind of framing it as this kind of oppressive patriarchal thing. And this guy came from a long history of yogis. And he was like, oh, no, no, that's not why. Women were allowed to do yoga, they just didn't need to. The reason it became a male only dominated thing is because we realized that you basically had a direct line to source, a direct line to wisdom, a direct line to God. You are so much more tapped in as the creators of all life. And we didn't. We were disconnected. So we had to create something called yoga, which means yoke, union, as a practice to try and get a glimpse of the closeness that you had inbuilt in just your being. Tragically, of course, modern life has caused us to lose that. And, yoga's for everyone and blah, blah, blah. But it's so interesting to hear that perspective because, yeah, a woman in her natural state, supported and kept safe by the man and provided for to the degree that that is the particular, setup is so incredibly powerful in the most simple way. I'm not saying that we necessarily need a female president or anything like that, though it would be interesting to entertain ideas like that. But just the feminine needs more respect than I think culturally we're putting on it right now. And I think that people like you and I having these conversations see it slightly differently. But in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter if at the highest levels of government and policy, again, we do lip service to no, like it's 50-50 now, it's an equal society, when really when the decisions are being made, it's just not. And I think that we can see where that's gotten us. And as much as it's gotten us a lot of progress and a lot of technical advancements and, cities that function well and roads and all of those things, like I think that's where we excel as the masculine, like structure and
Yeah.
safety. But I think kind of like policy wise and like what we actually do to create a world where people are, fundamentally happy and whole and more celebratory of things like creating life and not blowing each other up over war and oil and things like that. I can't see that this current system being the solution to that. I just can't see it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That was yeah, that was an interesting path, man. I appreciate you opening up about that and kind of where we went with the yin and the yang. It was interesting. I wasn't expecting that, but that was really unique. And it just makes a lot of sense to me. I wanted to thank you for coming on today. We're almost at the 2-hour mark and went by quick. Thank you for coming here for the second time and being with me and sharing your wisdom, sharing your heart, and just speaking to my audience. I'm probably going to ask you to come back on in 6 months, maybe even less. And just thank you for everything. I'm looking forward to the day I come out to CrossFit Mayhem and come train with
Yeah.
you. My friend Cami is there right now, from Colombia.
Oh, heck yeah.
So she's over there getting after it, training for the games. But brother, thank you so much. If there's anything else you want to say to the audience, please do.
No, thank you, man. Thank you for the opportunity to share thoughts. It's really cool to trade seats. As you know, like I have a podcast and I'm sitting in the seat as host so often. And it's just cool to let it rip and see what comes out. And it's kind of funny too, because I think for want of a better word, your kind of podcast plan, I don't think we really touched on where we thought it was going to go, which is always the case. But that's good, I think, because it needed to go where it went for a reason. And that means that, podcast 3, we need to come on and talk about like the nutritional side of things or the health side of things too. And I'd be more than happy to do that whenever the right time it feels good for you and your audience. I just appreciate the chance to connect, man. I really enjoy these conversations. I love your questions and your energy. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. And to that point, guys, if you want me to get Steve back, put in the comments. We'll do it.
We'll do it.
He
I'll do as many as you guys until I get you in trouble or you get sick of me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, it's funny. I'm looking at my notes here and I touched on like 2 things I wanted to talk about today. But to me, this conversation was exactly what I wanted and in some points what I needed right now. And I hope that's the same for you guys listening. So Steve, once again, Thank you very much, brother.
Thank you.
All
We'll
right.
see you next
Bye,
time.
everyone.
Peace.